If you are interested in science, specifically biology and cells, and if you've ever wondered how medical advances are made to treat new diseases, cancers, genetic deformities, and you're interested in ethics and historical practices of scientific advances, then The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is for you. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot is a New York Times #1 bestseller. I would recommend this book to advanced 8th grade students and up because there are topics within the science that are challenging to understand, as well as grueling topics like autopsies, STDs, marital infidelity, and sexual and child abuse, which could require some aided conversation with an adult. Even though this book was written in 2010, it will transport you back more than 60 years to where the story begins. In January 1951, we meet Henrietta, who was born Loretta Pleasant in Roanoke, Virginia, on August 1st, 1920, as the 9th child in a family of 10. Her mother died giving birth to the youngest sibling, so her father took all of his children back to Clover, Virginia, where the majority of the extended family still lived and worked. No one in the family would take all 10 children, so Henrietta and her siblings were split up between different aunts and uncles and her grandfather. Can you imagine losing your mother, being forced to move to a new town, being split up from your siblings, and asked to live with a family that you did not know well? Well, Henrietta did just that. She moved into her grandfather's house, which everyone called the home house. It was a former 4-room log cabin that had served as slave quarters. Henrietta and her cousins spent much of their young lives planting or harvesting tobacco, pulling the wide leaves from their stalks and tying them to bundles to be sold. Henrietta had 2 children by this time she was 18 and eventually married her cousin David at 20. Trying for a new life, David moved 4 hours away from Clover and the rest of his family to a steel mill in Turner's Point, Maryland. After many months trying to earn enough money to bring Henrietta and the 2 children along, Henrietta finally moved to her new home and community. However, Henrietta never loved her new life in the city and would often take the children to go back to Clover on the weekends to visit family, work the tobacco field, and churn butter on the home house stoop. While in the city, she would often sneak out to go dancing with Sadie Sturdivant, her cousin and friend, while her husband was out working at night. Sadie also became Henrietta's confidant when she eventually became sick with cervical cancer. One day, Henrietta told Sadie, "I've got a knot inside of me." Sadie and the other cousins assumed that Henrietta was pregnant again, but Henrietta disagreed because the feeling was different and more painful. Despite her concern, Henrietta found out that she was pregnant with her 5th child, and 4.5 months after that son was born, Henrietta began to experience bleeding and more pain. She went to the gynecology clinic at Johns Hopkins, one of the only hospitals in their area that treated Black patients at the time, when the wards were still segregated and had colored-only fountains. While there, the doctor took a biopsy of a mass that had grown on her cervix to test for cancer. Over the years, so many of these cells were grown and sent around the world that there have been an estimated 50 million metric tons created. That's enough to circle the Earth 3 times if attached end to end. Most anyone who has ever worked in a biomedical laboratory would have seen or used these cells to study to this day. These cells are called HeLa cells, HE for the first 2 letters in Henrietta, and LA for the 2 letters in Lacks. Do you think it was right for Henrietta's cells to be used for scientific advancement if she wasn't aware of it? It wasn't until over 20 years later that informed consent came into law. That means there's now a form you're asked to sign that allows doctors and scientists to use your discarded body parts to better their understanding of science in hope of creating more amazing medicines. What would you think if the whole world had the ability to buy and use your cells? What if everyone knew exactly what your cells contained? Diseases, predispositions to illness, or other shortcomings? What if it was your cells that were left behind and tested? Would it affect your loved ones? Many of these questions are posed in the book. Many medical advances were developed and understood because of the study of these cells, but at what cost? Henrietta Lacks was never given the choice of privacy or anonymity. What types of laws, regulations, and activist groups have stemmed from this lack of choice? Read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks to find out the answers to some of these questions and thought-provoking ethical situations that our country still faces today. It chronicles the story of not only the life of one woman, but the effect her story has had on medical, legal, and ethical consequences of then, now, and the future.